Hi, my name is Susan Wood and I come from Scotland. And for regular viewers of the website, you may know that this is my third visit. I come from the east coast of Scotland and grew up by the beach and love the shore, and I have lived for most of my adult life away from the sea. But I've always been rushing on holiday to the sea. And after I finished lecturing in German, I began to spend almost all my time to do with art. And I did an MA in art history at the Courtauld, and after that I did quite a lot of courses in glass making. And I also did a number of short courses in printmaking and various different art skills. And in recent years, I did a 2-year MA in glass at the University of Sunderland, and my main focus was the shore. And when it was finished, I wanted to do a residency in somewhere as far away from anywhere as I could find, right by the sea. So that was my main criteria, and Stöðvarfjörður fits the bill perfectly. And when I came, I was interested in producing work to do with the shore, and also I love collecting things. I think when we talked about our work, Una said, "Oh, I can see that each time you're busy collecting things and making your table look very busy and full." And I do love going on the shore and looking for things and working with what I find. And what's been interesting is that on each of the 3 occasions, I've found totally different things. My main interest really is seaweed. And you can see up there the piece of work I've called Wild Flowers. In the winter, you don't expect to find many flowers, especially in Iceland. And for me, these pieces of seaweed which are washed up on the beach, they're called kelp, and the bit at the bottom of the seabed is called the holdfast. And in my piece of work, it looks as though that is actually where the flowers are, and the bit hanging down are the roots, but actually it's the other way around. The kelp is anchored to the seabed by what is the top in my piece. So I've really done something quite surreal, if you like. I've made out of something which is normally the other way up, I've made it into a bunch of flowers. So I love the seaweed and I like making things with it. And you may have seen around the building 2 other pieces, 3 pieces I did in the previous 2 visits, where I was using what I found, which on the first occasion was long sticks of kelp washed up by the natural geyser, which you've been to visit and was one of the great attractions in this area. And the second time I was making a piece of work based on weaving these bits of kelp in and out. But on the second occasion, I found that in the summer, all the pieces of seaweed had dried up almost completely, so they were down to wooden sticks, whereas the first time they were much fresher and juicier and white almost in colour. And this time when I arrived, there'd been a lot of very wild storms, and I think we'll show later the beach where I collected the work and where a lot of these washed up. Because it's so wild, you have to imagine that the pieces of seaweed are swept off the bottom of the seabed by the force of the waves and storm. So you can see here some of the pieces this time, I like working with found objects, and here you can see 2 wine racks. I've painted them black so that the shape of the wine rack disappears almost, and then I have positioned the seaweed as if not as if it was bottles of wine, but I've wound it in and out of this structure. And so in general, I like to work with found materials. I think somebody said, "Do you always do the same thing?" Because this is your 3rd visit. And I think, like most artists, I have themes and I have materials that I like working with, but every time, to me at least, it's different and it's new, because the things that inspire me will be slightly different each time. And this time I've done some prints, which you can see on the table, based on lino cuts, based on the shape of the seaweed. And as usual, I found bits of old metal and things that I've found interesting, and I've incorporated them into prints that I've made. I suppose because I've collected all the stuff, when you look at the table now, you'll think, oh, it doesn't look very full, but I think you can see in the earlier pictures how I did have a whole range of different materials, and how then from all those pieces I've selected the ones which were most relevant to the theme, which is the seaweed. So I've eliminated all the pieces to do with the sheep's horn and the fir cone and other things I'd found and worked with. I suppose I'm interested in artists like Tony Cragg, who has made assemblages out of old rubbish, anything he's found, things that would normally be thrown away. And I suppose a lot of my work is to do with found objects and working with things I find. And in the building here I found a propeller, and you can see it on the table, reinvented as a different shape. And well, it's the same shape, but it's made into something different. So I've used what I found to make something which is, if you like, a sort of flower, but that wasn't a very strict theme that I was sticking to. The idea of coming 3 times, and I'm hoping to come a 4th time, is to show work eventually at the end of the 4 visits, to show a piece of work which will reflect the 4 seasons here in the village. And so far I've done spring, summer and winter, and I've got autumn still to come. The main thing about this season, winter, which I've really enjoyed, to my great surprise, has actually been the skies, because I'd been thinking, well, it'll be dark a lot of the time and I won't see very much, and I may, if I'm lucky, see the northern lights. But actually, far more exciting than the northern lights were the polar stratospheric clouds, which we saw towards the beginning of the month, which had all the colours of the rainbow and just looked stunning and just flickered across the sky for most of one afternoon. And I actually saw them as I was flying into the airport in Reykjavik, and I didn't know at all what I was seeing. I could just see an iridescent dancing around in the sky, even from the aeroplane. So the skies and the sunrise and sunset, again, have been really spectacular. You've got incredible beauty both in the east, where you don't expect to see a sunset, and the west, where you do expect to see it. So I've loved that, and obviously my final piece of work based on the 4 seasons will probably include quite a lot of reflections on the sky. So also, just to say, the other person who's very influential on me is Richard Long, who's a land artist who loves to walk and has actually been to Iceland. And everywhere he goes, like, people might say to him, well, isn't this just another walk? Haven't you just put another few pebbles down in a row? And again, it's because he loves nature, he loves walking, he loves exploring, but he loves looking in detail at what he finds, and he actually quite likes reassembling it. And I suppose all of those things I would share with him, although I can't aspire to be anything like the artist that he is. So those are my plans for the future, that I want to build a more thoughtful piece based around my final conclusions at the end of the 4 visits, which obviously I've now done 3 and enjoyed very much. And if anybody's thinking of coming, I would 100% recommend it if you like wild, remote places and lovely people to work with, and a great atmosphere for working. If you're looking for pubs and discos, it's not your place.